Hey everybody, welcome back to another video, and in this video today we have another Markiplier theory. This one is specifically about the crystal that the chief ends up wearing on his wrist in Space with Markiplier, and we'll also be kind of finding out what its purpose really is in the Markiplier lore. And I did a bit more research and rewatched a bunch of more like Markiplier projects and stuff. And I'm just going to say what I found out actually ties together a lot. And if we still have time at the end of the video, I might be reading a couple of y'all's theories that y'all commented on my other Markiplier theories. And one more thing before I start talking about the like blue crystal thing in Space with Markiplier, I want to bring up at least this one comment right here. So Tom Scott says, I definitely agree with the date with Markiplier connection, because I think the books that Markiplier is holding is saying horror and romance, which is the two films you can see in A Date with Markiplier. Interestingly, when you select horror, that's where you see Darkiplier. So for those of y'all who don't know, in my last video, I pretty much just went through all these glitches and stuff that were like hints towards what will come in Space with Markiplier Part 2. And this one image right here I have on the screen where he's holding two books. I totally agree with what Tom said. That absolutely 100% says horror and romance now that I'm actually looking at it. I couldn't tell what it said at first, but that's probably because whenever I was recording that video, I was like, that was the last thing I did before going to sleep. Okay, so there's either two ways this can go now. We can either pick like horror, romance and stuff. It'll like let us choose, and we pick horror, and then we meet Darkiplier, and that's awesome because then we get to see Darkiplier in Space with Markiplier, which would just be super awesome. Or Markiplier could be just playing tricks on us and knows that we'd be anticipating Darkiplier, so he purposely tricks us. Either one of those I feel like would be the case. But yeah, I totally agree with Tom. Shout out to him. He's like the first person who I saw notice that. But now let's talk about the blue crystal. So for those of y'all who don't know, I'm going to pretty much kind of summarize this first part. In Space with Markiplier, the chief gets a crystal on his wrist, and pretty much everybody's been pointing out how that crystal is very similar to the blue crystal that's on the box that you're trying to steal in a heist with Markiplier. After looking back at a few of the endings in a heist with Markiplier, I realized that this is no coincidence. Those are most likely, I'd say they probably are the same crystal, the same thing. And there's two endings that make me believe this. Now, the first one takes place by doing the kind of zombie route where a zombie apocalypse happens, and then you hear on the radio where there's some dude with prime ribs at a survivor camp thing. You can either go to there, or you can go to this smart science kind of crazy-ish lady who thinks she knows what's happening and going on and why there's a zombie apocalypse. And if you choose to go with the crazy lady, she ends up having a kind of machine that can detect what's the thing that's causing all of this weirdness to happen, and it ends up detecting the box with the blue crystal on it that you and Markiplier stole from the museum.
Can I see this box of yours?
You idiot!
This is the anomaly!
This is the anomaly!
I'm destroying this thing right here, right now.
And once she destroys it, it shows you literally can see right here all of the other choices and timelines just disappearing, and the only timeline that's left is the one that you've had up to that point. So that ending just kind of outright says it, just right then and there, that it's pretty much the same thing from us in Space with Markiplier. But there is one other ending where you and Markiplier randomly end up in space, and with this kind of two-headed alien thing. The aliens then proceed to call the thing that y'all stole the marker, and then they explain why it's so important.
As you already well know, that marker contains the sum total of all knowledge our race has ever gathered. The secrets of the universe and all the technological advances you could ever hope for.
Oh, wow.
By returning this to us, you are very clearly stating that you, as representative of humanity, are willing to let mankind struggle and risk total annihilation.
Oh yeah, and the alien also kind of wants to destroy the human race for some reason. Who knows, maybe they'll end up becoming the villains for In Space with Markiplier Part 2. Now, before we continue, I do want to warn you, in all of the other endings, the contents of what's inside of the box or what the purpose of the box is does change, throughout all the endings. In one of the endings, it's literally world's oldest picnic basket. But I just still felt the need to at least mention this ending right here in this new theory video. But now let's take a second to go back to the old ending that we talked about before this ending. The one with the zombie apocalypse and the timeline being reset and stuff. At the end of that one, Markiplier says this.
You, want to go on that date?
This could mean that a heist with Markiplier takes place right before a date with Markiplier. But then that brings up a whole different question that I actually should have also mentioned in my last Markiplier theory video, since this question also applies to that video, but I guess I didn't really think of it at the time, so I'll just say it now. Look at the Wilford Wharf stash cameos in both A Date with Markiplier and A Heist with Markiplier. Both of them have the Wilford Wharf stash that is far into the rabbit hole of craziness. Meanwhile, In Space with Markiplier, which should be taking after those two, has a Wilford Wharf stash that would have taken place earlier in the timeline, which doesn't make sense. Why would Wilford Wharf stash have his future look in those two Markiplier projects, but then later on in the timeline, he has the look of his past self? Now, this question can actually be answered pretty easily. I mean, in both A Heist with Markiplier and A Date with Markiplier, where we see the future Wilford Wharf stashes, those are whenever you're dealing with weird dimension-hopping, timeline-changing events and weird things like that. So it's pretty safe to say that with all that kind of weird timeline hopping, you're also most likely traveling through time as well. That's how you're able to see a future Wilford Wharf stash before you see the Wilford Wharf stash with the pink wig and yellow pants and stuff. Although the bad part about that is that dimension hopping and timeline changing and timeline resetting and all that stuff also comes in Space with Markiplier. So unfortunately, this might possibly mean that we don't know where In Space with Markiplier goes on the timeline anymore. We do know that it most likely comes 5 years. I'm pretty sure it was 5 years based off of the parole Markiplier has. We know that it's 5 years before A Date with Markiplier, which A Date with Markiplier is probably just a couple days or a couple hours or something before A Heist with Markiplier. Maybe. So we do know where it takes place next to some other videos, but we don't fully know where that kind of group or chunk of Markiplier videos really fit in the rest of the Markiplier timeline. Actually, now that I think of it, we do know at least that it at least takes place after Who Killed Markiplier, just because we see Wilford Wharf stash and Darkiplier in it at all. Besides that, that's all we really know. And before I go, I do want to go ahead and mention one other comment that I got on a past Markiplier theory. Okay, so Lost Kid says there is someone who theorized that with Heist with Markiplier, there is one ending where you're traveling through time and space. you see a ship in the background which people think is the Invincible One, while he interestingly is wearing the suit from Date with Markiplier, which could be not Darkiplier or Markiplier, depending on if the canonicity we get to the end of Darkiplier versus Markiplier and we shoot one of them, if that's like canon or not. So, okay, so it says, edit, it's the last don't split up option that you get, so I guess you just choose the last don't split up option for whenever you're playing a heist with Markiplier. And there's also a whole prison sequence, therefore it could be hinting that you did go to jail with in-lore Markiplier, which is why he's now out on parole. Shout out to Lost Kid. He's commented on my videos multiple times, and he has lots of his own very good theories about the whole Markiplier lore. So yeah, shout out to him. And the ending that he's talking about in A Heist with Markiplier is this one, where you pretty much travel through lots of different other endings or clips or videos from Heist with Markiplier. Since anytime you use this watch to teleport, you end up teleporting to different endings from A Heist with Markiplier, I don't really know if the one where they go into space is a nod towards In Space with Markiplier. I think it's more of a nod towards the ending that I just talked about with the alien with the two heads, talking about the box itself. And I know there is that ship in the background, which may be the Invincible, and it might be. There's just one problem with that, and it's that in the first trailer of In Space with Markiplier, we see the Invincible ship, but without the 2 on it, which might mean that that's the first Invincible. But at the same time, we don't really have anything that confirms this to be the first Invincible. For all we know, this could have just been a clip of the Invincible 2 that Markiplier didn't fully finish editing or adding the 2 on yet. So it might not be the first Invincible. So Lost Kid might actually be right that ship in the background is the first Invincible, especially speaking timeline-wise, it would make sense. But hey, that's just a theory. And this joke is getting old because I'm pretty sure I've already used it in many of the other Markiplier theories. Okay, so thank y'all for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. As always, if you do have any theories or any thoughts about about the Markiplier lore, please feel free to put them in the comments. And yeah, thank y'all for watching, and goodbye.